Trevor Brown of the Opus Bakehouse shares his passion and excitement for baking. We talk about the beginning of his niche bakery and discuss the importance of organically grown ingredients and grass-fed dairy. You can find more conversations on our website, lacrosselocal.com. I'm Amy.
And I'm Brent.
And this is Lacrosse Local.
My name is Trevor Brown. I was born in Ames, Iowa. It's a college town, not dissimilar from La Crosse. I got into baking from a very sideways, roundabout, very circuitous route. My mother was and is very into baking, but I really didn't catch the bug at all until I was in college. Then I started slowly getting into sourdough because that's what my mother had recently gotten into when I was in college. And I dabbled in sourdough and baking in general for, maybe 10, 12 years after that. And my career was actually in software. I lived in Madison, Wisconsin, and did some user experience and art direction for a time. I continued to dabble in baking, and I would bring croissants in for my coworkers and make cakes and scones and things like that. But I never really considered it to be a serious pursuit. However, after my first son was born, I decided to go stage with a local baker there in Madison for a time and really liked the work. It was just for an overnight with him, but really, really enjoyed the work. Within about a year, had decided to leave my job and go work for that bakery for a season. And at the same time, I worked for an organic farm. I fell in love with both and kind of continued that for the remainder of that season. And after that, we moved to La Crosse for my wife's job. It's kind of funny. It was maybe the first week we were here, we were wandering around trying to find a decent baked good. And we were just having a little bit more trouble than we expected. I was looking for a croissant, kind of a long fermented croissant made with some whole grains like we had enjoyed frequently in Madison. And we just couldn't find anything that quite fit the bill. And my wife turned to me and she said, "Trevor, why don't you just start something?" I said she was crazy, but 3 months later, I had opened up this teeny tiny little stall at the Cameron Park Market and was selling there and have sold there ever since.
It seems like, you just have a history of it and it's kind of gradually turned into this Opus Bakehouse. So that was kind of the impetus. That was the start of the business.
That was the start of the business, that moment when my wife just asked me, "Why don't you try making something and see if people will pay you money for it?" And it grew very, very slowly by design. I'm coming up my 3rd year anniversary, and I'm still definitely what you would consider a nano bakery. I'm about as small as they come.
You make local baked goods. You pride yourself on using organically grown ingredients, grass-fed dairy. Why is that so important to you as a baker?
So many reasons. So many things went into my passion for those types of ingredients. The origins of that are twofold. One, when I was working at the bakery in Madison, it was Crest Spring Bakery, run by Jeff Ford, and he sources ingredients more carefully than anybody I've ever met. He gets everything he can from local farmers and growers and producers. As a result, his products, they all have character. It's kind of this, it's hard to define character, but it's a character that I believe comes from the simple fact that he is using not only the highest quality ingredients he can get his hands on, but they are all ingredients that he's hand selected. They give his products something really special. And I wanted to have that same intangible thing present in my baked goods. Secondly, when I was working on the farm, the organic farm in Madison, I guess you could say I drank the Kool-Aid. I understood what organic farming was all about for the first time. I came to understand it's not about what doesn't go into farming. It's not about the lack of pesticides or herbicides. It's more about the presence of and the importance of building organic matter in the soil and feeding your soil and feeding your land as opposed to feeding the crops, which is, I think that's the real critical distinction. And I believe it's so important for the health of our planet. If we're going to continue feeding 7+ billion people, we have to do it much more carefully and intentionally than I think we have been. There's also just the fact I come to really enjoy speaking with and getting to know farmers locally in this area. The Driftless area is so full of amazing growers and producers. And it still shocks me that so many local cafes, restaurants, bakeries don't use any of the products that are being grown in this amazing, this bountiful area all around us, still bringing in products from far away because it's more convenient and it's cheaper. And as a business owner, I understand why you need things to be as inexpensive as possible, your ingredients, and convenience is a big factor. I spend a lot of my time running around, again, hand selecting a lot of these ingredients carefully, but I believe it does result in a product that is more delicious and much better for you.
Absolutely. So what is a typical day of like preparation for before you serve at the market? Is it early hours or is it a multi-day event? Or
I've recently got things gelled into a little bit more of a regular schedule. And my typical weekly schedule is Wednesday night, I feed my starters because I do all naturally leavened. All of my leavened products are leavened naturally, that is to say with a sourdough. Thursday, I spend pretty much the whole day at the bakery facility. I rent out at the Cooley Region Business Center. It's a kind of a shared use kitchen / incubation center on the north side of town. So I spend all day Thursday there building my doughs up, fermenting them, and in those interstitial moments between all of the mixing and the kneading of the dough, I prepare scones. Like I freeze all my scone dough on Thursdays because freezing scones actually makes them bake up better. So you want your butter to be really cold. So that's a nice example of something that increases the quality of my products, but also makes it a little bit more convenient for me because I can do it a couple days in advance. And then Friday I go in to do things like shape my croissants, shape my brioche, so all those things can proof very slowly overnight. Saturday morning is between 3:30 and 4 o'clock is when I start, get everything assembled and into the ovens, cooled, garnished, packed, and then the whole space, of course, has to be clean before I can leave. And as a result, I am sometimes a little bit late for the market just because timing that perfectly I found it to be almost impossible. But I'm getting better. I'm slowly working towards improving my timing there.
basically just seeing that your passion when you talk about baking it's really interesting. What's the most fun item to create?
Oh boy. You've identified, I love baking. I'm so into it. And the products I'm most interested in, it sometimes changes seasonally based on what produce is available. When there are certain fruits, I love working with apples for one, so this is a fun time of year for certain products. But I think consistently the type of pastry I'm most into is anything that's laminated. So croissants or puff pastry. These are both products where you are making a lean dough that has very little fat in it, but then you're using that dough to encase a big slab of butter. And then over the course of 5 to 8 hours, you're laminating that butter within the dough. And that involves rolling it out, folding it, rolling it out, folding it, doing that 3 or 4 times, because each time you're tripling or quadrupling the number of layers. And that's how you get a flaky pastry. And right now I'm doing it by hand with a rolling pin. It's a lot of work, it's labor intensive, but it's also a very enjoyable and very meditative experience. And it's also one that I have the most growth left. I'm not great at it yet. It's something I love doing, but that's the beautiful thing about baking is there is always 15 things that I feel like I could be so much better at. I don't think that's ever going to change. I think you could talk to me in 30 years and I would say the exact same thing to you. That's why this is such a cool career for me.
So I'm sure you've had some hiccups lately in the last couple of months with COVID happening. What's next for you? Does that change anything, or have you found this time to be a little bit renewing, or how do you find this experience over the last 6 months?
Oh gosh, Brent, it's a great question, and I'm very fortunate in that my business is it's still so small that COVID did not affect me negatively, hardly at all. It makes me so sad because so many really great Restaurants, cafes locally, as you know, have been forced to either scale down or shut down entirely because of COVID. So I hesitate to speak of this time as anything other than a very negative, very hard time for anybody, especially who's in the food business. But I am trying to view it the next year as an opportunity to continue to grow, but to grow at a slightly faster pace than I have the last 3 years. And I'm not exactly sure where that's going to be. I've been very casually looking at retail spaces in the area. I've also been considering something called a community-supported bakery model, similar to a community-supported agriculture model, in that these models, they're all different, but it's similar to a CSA in that customers would pay maybe monthly or even annually, and then expect to get a box of bread and pastry once a week or once a month or twice a month or whatnot with the different products that I make. An idea that I've been toying around with too is having an online order system set up and then partnering with a local business who has some kind of storefront to basically bring a rack full of baked goods that have been pre-ordered and prepaid for by my customers, bringing that to a business, having people come pick up at their convenience throughout the day. Just because that would continue to give me the flexibility to bake when I can bake, but then also be able to sell even if there's not a farmer's market on a particular day, and without my own retail space. I'm anticipating with COVID and with everything else and just being a business owner in general, you got to stay so agile and got to be willing to jump at opportunities when they come.
Absolutely. And, with the popularity of the butcher boxes and the ready-to-cook meals, and now you have a bakery box concept, I know my wife would be excited about that. So if people wanted to find out more, what's the best avenue to either come pick up some baked goods or just follow along on your process?
I've got a Facebook and Instagram account. It's just Opus Bakehouse. And that's where I post my weekly menu for the farmers market and any other updates I might have. Yeah, also just coming down to say hello at the Cameron Park Farmers Market Saturdays. We open at 8 o'clock. I'm generally pretty well sold out by 10 o'clock. And so I do tell my customers, come early if you want the best selection.
La Crosse Local Podcast is a production of River Travel Media. Do you have an interview idea you would like to share with us? Message us on Facebook at La Crosse Locals. Subscribe to the La Crosse Local Podcast on your favorite podcast app. If you like us, rate us 5 stars. We thank you for it.